So there are dozens of hormones in the body, and estrogen, testosterone, and progesterone are the reproductive hormones that cycle, that impact your mood and behavior. Estrogen starts to rise the day you get your period. It hits the bottom, its lowest point, right before you get your period. And once you get your period, a few hours later, it starts to rise. And then it peaks at ovulation. And then it drops. Not many women realize this, but your estrogen drops twice in your cycle, not just once.
Let's go!
Cześć, witam Was bardzo serdecznie w pierwszym odcinku programu Koleżanki. Mam na imię Martyna i będę rozmawiać tutaj z ekspertkami w różnych dziedzinach o kobiecym ciele, o zdrowiu psychicznym i fizycznym, o hormonach, o miesiączce, o cyklu menstruacyjnym. Dzisiaj pokażę Wam pierwszy odcinek programu, w którym będę rozmawiała z Gabrielle Lichterman. Gabrielle jest amerykańską dziennikarką, piszącą o kobiecym zdrowiu do takich magazynów jak Cosmopolitan, Glamour, Marie Claire. Jest też autorką książki 28 dni, jak cykl menstruacyjny wpływa na nasze zdrowie, nastrój i zachowanie. Oraz jest autorką, jest twórczynią aplikacji Hormonology, w której pokazuje, w jaki sposób wahania hormonów w całym cyklu menstruacyjnym mogą wpływać na nas każdego dnia. Na razie zarówno aplikacja, jak i książka dostępne są tylko w języku angielskim. Z Gabrielle rozmawiałyśmy o tym, że dzieli ona cykl menstruacyjny na 4 fazy. Opowiadała, jak te 4 fazy różnią się od siebie. Mówiła też, jak wahania poziomu progesteronu, estrogenu, testosteronu w ciągu miesiąca mogą wpływać na nasze życie codzienne, jakie są tego pozytywne i negatywne strony. I mówiła też o tym, jak można zsynchronizować życie codzienne z cyklem menstruacyjnym i dlaczego jej zdaniem warto to zrobić. Zapraszam Was serdecznie do oglądania. So you're actually saying that we can benefit from all of this.
Yes, the great thing about knowing how your hormones impact you every single day of your cycle is that you can maximize the benefits. You can capitalize on what's good, and you can avoid or at least minimize hormone-linked challenges. So say you're in your week 2, which is the week leading up to and including ovulation. You know that this is a week that's going to be full of energy. So you would schedule, say, a big project for that week in your cycle. You would maximize the benefits. You would take advantage of the benefits. And say, during your premenstrual week 4, the days leading up to your period, maybe you tend to get headaches or migraines during that day. Well, now you can track it and say, okay, I know this is going to happen, so I'm going to take precautions. I'm going to lighten my workload. I'm going to have my remedies ready. You can sync your life with your cycle to make yourself healthier and happier. Nobody was really talking about it. The only times that people talked about it, was some researchers would occasionally be interviewed about their work, but then they would be, I don't know what you can call it, they were shut down, they were ridiculed. In one article that I read from the New York Times, which is a large publication in the US, a woman who led this great research about how hormones impact how our spatial skills throughout our cycle. She was talking about that in the article, and then the reporter interviewed a leading feminist, and that feminist said, we can't take this research seriously. We can't even listen to this research because this is the kind of research that people will use against us and say why we can't be president, why we won't be, elected, why we won't, make it into, the higher levels of careers. And so researchers sometimes did try to tell us, but they were shut down. The world really wasn't ready. So in 1999, when I found all this research and it was just being neglected, as a women's health journalist, I knew that this information could help millions, just countless people out there. So I gathered all the studies. I poured over them. I looked over them. I reviewed them. I examined them. I interviewed experts. I read, endocrinology books, and I put it all together. And for the first time ever, all this information was being put together and plugged into a menstrual cycle calendar so that not only could women see how their hormones impact them every day, but they could see the pattern.
When we know that hormones influence so much the way we act, the way we think, our emotions and everything, how do we know, maybe it sounds funny, but how do we know that we want to leave our partner because we really want to do it, or because we're hormonal, let's say? Or how do we know if we really want to quit our job, or is that hormonal? So this is my first question, and then I'll pass to another one.
Okay, that's a good question. So you have to wonder if not knowing how your hormones impact you makes you more of a slave to them, or knowing how they impact you makes you more powerful. Because if I want to leave my partner, I get angry and that's it, I'm calling it quits. But I pause and I realize I'm in my premenstrual week 4. This is a phase where plunging estrogen has a specific effect on the brain. It can lower certain levels of certain brain chemicals that impact mood and make me less patient. If I can pause and say, I'm looking at the world through this prism, and maybe I can step back and take a second look, that gives me more power over my hormonal effects. If I didn't have this knowledge that I might be looking at the world through this view, then I would just go forward with my behavior and think it must be his fault, it must be my partner's fault, and I'm just sick and tired of this. But if I can realize, you know what, I'm feeling a little less patient today, I'm feeling much more easily irritated today, and maybe that's the problem, at least I have that ability to override my hormonal influences because I'm aware of them. I liken this to if you drank caffeine, if you drank a lot of coffee, or you drank alcohol. These things have an effect on you. So just because you drank coffee and now you're really, really, really energized, you may have the feeling like you could run like a 25-mile marathon and win, but you're not going to do it. You have that energy, but okay, this is just the caffeine talking. Or alcohol. Alcohol, you lose your inhibition. So, I'm going to go over and talk to that person and flirt wildly with that person. But if you say to yourself, you know what, that's just alcohol. I'll probably regret it in the morning if I do that because I'll embarrass myself. You can acknowledge, okay, there's this thing that's impacting my behavior and I can override it. In the same way, you can say, okay, well, I have this urge to break up with my partner, but you know what? I'm under the influence of hormones. Hormones are influencing me. Maybe I need to override that influence. So you have that awareness. So it gives you that power as opposed to just going forward and not understanding why.
How to talk about hormones, not to and not to think of women as hormonal, and not to think of women as those who are controlled by their hormones. There.
I think my answer will be shorter than your question.
I got confused.
No, I mean, really, it will be shorter. No, but I understand what you're saying, and I understand that argument that you're making, and it's a valid argument. I shouldn't say valid. It's a common argument that I've heard, a common point that I've heard. And here's my answer. Men have a hormone cycle too, and they are just as impacted by their hormones as women are, as teenagers are. Men's hormone cycle, very briefly, it's dominated by testosterone, although men do make a small amount of estrogen and progesterone. But when we talk about a men's hormone cycle, the male hormone cycle, we're really talking about testosterone. So testosterone is highest in the morning, and it goes down over time over that day. So it peaks in the morning, and then it goes down across the day as the day goes on. And then it starts all over again the next day. So a male hormone cycle lasts 24 hours. So every 24 hours, they are going through a new cycle, as opposed to our very, by comparison, long 28-day cycle. So if you want to talk about moody, point to the men's hormone cycle, where high testosterone in the morning makes them more aggressive, competitive, ambitious. And then as it goes down, as the day goes on, they become friendlier, more open. And then at night, when their testosterone plunges, they feel fatigue and fogginess. And if this sounds a little bit like the female hormone cycle, there's a reason, because hormones impact mood, energy, and behavior in men just as much as women.
So I know it's very hard to talk about it briefly, but could you just more or less explain how hormones influence our cycle week by week?
So for the sake of hormonology, there are 4 weeks in your cycle, or 4 phases. Week 1 starts with the first day of your period, and it lasts 7 days. And that week is your period week. So it starts off kind of slow, but during this week, estrogen is rising steadily. So day by day, your energy, mood, and desire to socialize increase. So week 2 comes after week 1 naturally, and it's the week leading up to and including ovulation. And in this phase of your cycle, in week 2, estrogen is really climbing fast and high, so it's spiking. And at the end of your week 2, testosterone also rises slightly. And during your week 2, this is when your energy peaks, your mood peaks, your ambition peaks, your desire to socialize, your libido, your ability to brainstorm, your desire to travel, everything peaks. This is a really outgoing, energetic phase. After week 2 is week 3. Week 3 is the 8 days following ovulation, and you can consider it a lot like the opposite of your week 2. Week 2 was extroverted. Week 3 is going to be introverted. You're quieter, you're slower, you're sedate. It's a foggy, fatiguing phase of your cycle because estrogen plunges and progesterone rises, and this hormone combination makes you more subdued. So after that is week 4. This is your premenstrual phase, and it really only lasts 6 days. So during your premenstrual week 4, estrogen and progesterone are plunging, and this is a time when you can be more emotionally or physically sensitive because plunging estrogen has that impact. This is a time when you could be a little less patient with yourself and others, and need a little bit more self-care.
What are some practical advice that you give at the beginning?
First, of course, learn as much as you can about your cycle, even just the basics, actually. Just start with the basics, and then take advantage of the big things, like when your mood and energy and desire to socialize and libido, when they all peak, they all peak at the same time. That's your week 2, the week leading up to and including ovulation. So start off by taking advantage of the good stuff, because so many people don't realize that there's so much good stuff that happens in their cycle, and they can predict when it will be happening so they could take advantage of it. Those are the days that you want to go to a party and meet new people and get on the dating app if you're single, or get into a dating event, in person, because you really like to meet new people, try new things. So take advantage of the good stuff. And then learn about when things are going to be a little bit more challenging, because again, this happens at the same time every cycle. And it's not just your premenstrual phase. For instance, many women have trouble with the fatigue that occurs right after ovulation. They go from this really high energy phase to a very low energy phase very quickly. And it can be very confusing if you don't understand why, but now that you know it's hormones, you can use this to sidestep or at least ease hormonal challenges.
Okay, but we are talking now about a lot of rules, but obviously this also works individually different for every person, I guess, because I experience, for instance, cravings at different times during the month than a lot of my friends or some of my friends. So
what are those cravings?
Usually meat cravings before my period, and I think cravings for sweet stuff right after my period or during the period. And I know that a lot of my friends, one friend told me lately that she feels nauseous when she's on her period. And I was surprised because this is the moment when I eat the most and I could eat everything. So it's very different.
Yes, you make a good point with the fact that there are variabilities between people. Things can be different between people. There is a broad overview of what you can expect. In your week 2, that's when your energy is going to be high. In your week 3, that's when energy is going to be low. Week 2, libido high. Week 3, libido low. But between people, there are some differences, as you pointed out. And some of those differences can be related to lifestyle or mineral or vitamin deficiencies, for instance.
Okay.
You could have more, for instance, week 2, that's supposed to be when your energy is the highest. But a lot of women write to me and say, I crash during my week 2. I have no energy. And then we talk about what could be the problems. And one of the most common reasons for that is an iron deficiency or low iron due to bleeding during menstruation the week before. It catches up with them in week 2. So you are hungrier during your week 1, it may be because you've learned to cope with period-related aches and pains or fatigue with food. That I do that. When I'm achy or blue, I go straight for sugar. It's a very, it's a kind of a primal thing because sugar releases endorphins, these feel-good chemicals in the brain. They make you feel good. And they also reduce pain. So we crave sugar when we crave a boost in mood or we're hurting. So your friend may feel nauseous during her period because she's losing iron, and that iron loss may be impacting her her appetite. So that's why there may be a difference, because you and this is just a guess, but you may be coping with period-related issues with sugar, and she may be having low iron. Even if it's not those, even if those aren't the actual reasons, it explains why there's some variation between people.
The most important hormones that we talk about here is estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone, right? Is there anything
correct.
else?
No, not in terms of impacting mood, health, and behavior.
So could you explain just a little how these 3 hormones work, like separately? I mean, estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. What are these?
So there are dozens of hormones in the body, and estrogen, testosterone, and progesterone are the reproductive hormones that cycle, that impact your mood and behavior. Estrogen starts to rise the day you get your period. It hits the bottom, its lowest point, right before you get your period. And once you get your period, a few hours later, it starts to rise. and then it peaks at ovulation, and then it drops. Not many women realize this, but your estrogen drops twice in your cycle, not just once. Many women realize that your premenstrual phase is caused by dropping estrogen, but they don't realize that estrogen drops twice. And the first time is right after ovulation. It's a very steep drop too. And this is a time when some women can be sensitive to that drop. So then it rises again and it drops again. And then we have testosterone, which is a complex hormone. So we usually associate testosterone with men because they have such a higher level of it. But we all make estrogen, testosterone, progesterone, just in different amounts. So our testosterone is pumped out at a usually steady level all cycle long, except for ovulation. At ovulation, the day before we ovulate, during ovulation, the day after we ovulate, it rises. It's a little elevated, tiny bit. However, that's not the whole story. Our body actually uses more testosterone as we create more estrogen. They work together. So even though it's a steady line visually, our body is really using testosterone. So estrogen helps boost our mood, energy, and our good feelings and our eloquence. Testosterone governs spatial skills. It governs ambition, competitiveness, libido. So the more that estrogen rises and brings up your mood and energy, the more effects we actually get from testosterone, even though itself is not rising. So we're feeling the effects of mood, ambition, competitiveness, libido as throughout the first half of our cycle. Second half of our cycle, estrogen falls twice, and we are dominated by progesterone. Progesterone starts to rise at ovulation. It peaks about 8 days later, and then it drops for the final 6 days of your luteal phase, during your premenstrual phase. And progesterone, I struggle to talk about progesterone because I don't want to make it out to be like the bad guy. I want to embrace all our hormones and be positive about all our
Okay.
It's really hard because progesterone makes it kind of difficult to like say nice things about it. But progesterone is the reason why our libido goes away, why we're tired, why we have foggy thinking. It's got its own benefits, but it is, it dominates the second half of our cycle, and it brings all these things with it. It revs our appetite. It's the reason we have all these food cravings. It's like I said, it's like the friend you want to like, but can be a little annoying. And so that's what's happening with our hormone.
So is that how you organize your life? Is it really what you do every week? Every minute.
My life is seen through a prism of my hormones, and I've been married for more than 22 years, and my husband loves hormonology too because he understands me. He lives hormonology every day. We both do. It's once you realize how you can understand yourself and use this incredible tool, you never want to give it up. In fact, to be honest, I'm in perimenopause now. So I've been skipping periods and my hormones have been, unpredictable because I'm almost 49, and it's understandable. And I'm sad. I'm sad to see my menstrual cycle go because I love how easy, all the shortcuts it gives me. I know what to eat. I know what books to read. I know what movies to watch. I know when to schedule things, all based on where I am in my cycle. I'm going to miss that a lot. I think it's a testament to how wonderful the menstrual cycle really is, the hormones in our menstrual cycle really are, because I do feel this bittersweet moment looking back and thinking I'm going to miss it. And it's good that I'm going to miss it because it means I made the most out of my cycling years by capitalizing on hormonal benefits and minimizing hormonal challenges. And I just rocked it. I rocked my hormone cycle, and I'm really glad. I'm going to miss it.
Missing all this really will make people think, okay, so it can be an amazing and positive thing, which I'm pretty sure is not at the moment for a lot of people still.
Yeah, you're right. And that's because they've only heard negative things. When they hear the reality, things that they can look forward to. And it's funny because they're experiencing these spikes in energy and mood. Women who have menstrual cycles and don't know about hormonology, do not know how their hormones impact them, are getting these great feelings and great energy, and libido is rising, but they don't know why. To them, it just happens out of the blue for no good reason. I remember when I was young, walking down the street and thinking, I had this amazing feeling of euphoria, and I couldn't understand why. I was just walking down the street. I'd walked down 1,000 times before, but for some reason the world just seemed happier, and I just was, I wasn't even drunk or high. I was just so euphoric. And now I know that was likely a week 2 moment when spiking estrogen was just spurting great feel-good chemicals in my brain.
What if we don't have time to do that?
If you can't do that, that's a good question.
Not that we don't have time to plan, but to plan it the way we would like
to.
Right,
I know exactly what you're saying, and that's a really good question. This is the great thing about knowing how your hormones impact you. When you can, you take advantage of them and you schedule things according to your cycle. You sync up with your cycle. But when you can't, you will know what hormonal challenges lie ahead so that you can compensate for them. For instance, say you're going on a family trip and it's whitewater rafting and requires a lot of energy. Outgoing and adventurous, but the family has decided, because of school and work and everybody else's schedules, it falls during your week 3, a time when you're tired and introverted and cautious. Well, knowing this ahead of time, you can take steps to make sure you enjoy the trip anyway. You'll understand, okay, I'm going to be more cautious because progesterone is making me cautious. So I'm going to have to push myself a little bit more to, embrace this adventure. And you're going to feel more tired. You're not going to have the energy that you need for whitewater rafting. So you can take steps ahead of time and say, okay, progesterone is making me tired. I know that I have to go to bed earlier the night before. I have to have a nutritious breakfast. I have to maybe drink some orange juice or coffee and something to perk me up. Certainly once they start whitewater rafting and, they're going crazy, your adrenaline kicks in. But until then, you can take steps because you'll need them. If you didn't know that your hormones would be making you tired, you would wake up the morning that you're supposed to go whitewater rafting and want to say, no, I don't want to do this. I'm too tired. It's too crazy. It's too risky. But because you have the knowledge, you can prepare your energy, know that you need to energize, and you can prepare mentally and say, okay, I know that this sounds crazy, but that's just progesterone talking. This is a safe adventure, and let me push forward. It gives you so much power. It gives you so much control over your life.
Maybe the biggest challenge here is to organize your work and your professional life around your cycle, because very often this is something that you have zero control of. It's your boss and your team that is organizing actually your life when it comes to work.
There are absolutely times in your cycle when you can't control what happens at work. Your boss, your coworkers, the schedule, it's out of your control. But there are some things that you can control. For instance, volunteering for a project, staying late, coming in early, working on weekends, focusing on a specific part of a project, like say there's several parts of the project that need to get done, and you can schedule which part you want to work on based on your cycle. So during the first half of your cycle, research shows that your verbal abilities are better, your physical and mental energy is better, you have more stamina, you can shorten yourself on sleep, you can skimp on sleep and still have energy. You can brainstorm easily during that time. So during the first half of your cycle, week 1 and week 2, from your period through ovulation, these are great times to volunteer for more projects. Put your hand up. Volunteer to take on a new project, to head up a task, pitch a client, stay late. You can do more. You'll have more confidence. And you're brainstorming more. So if there needs to be, like, your boss is looking for a big idea, this is a great time for you to come up with a big idea, because research shows that peaking estrogen helps you come up with more thoughts. You're thinking faster, and you're also more confident about your thoughts, so you're not as critical, which helps you come up with more ideas. So that's the first half of your cycle. Dig in. The second half of your cycle is more sedate. So you're going to have less energy, but you will also be better at focusing on detail work. So when you can, this is a time that you would take on projects that require more detail, like coding a website, editing a manuscript, that kind of thing. So if there's a project available that requires, focusing, you would really excel at that. So what can you do when you have to do something that your boss says, because that's just the way work is and it doesn't sync with your cycle? So say your boss wants you to pitch a new client, it's a big deal, it's a big client, you have to pitch the client, it's your week 3, a week when you're subdued and quiet, and your progesterone also interrupts verbal ability during that period. So what do? As we discussed before, knowing ahead of time what your hormonal challenges will be helps you overcome them, so they no longer are challenges. And by that I mean, so say you have to pitch the client, it's your week 3 is subdued, you're kind of making some verbal blunders because of progesterone, which interrupts verbal ability. And by that I mean progesterone slows you down and gives you more ums and ahs, or makes you say the wrong word in conversation. Okay, so say you have to pitch a client to week 3. To overcome those, okay, I need more energy. You're either going to drink caffeine or juice, or do a little exercise before that pitch to pump up your energy, to compensate and overcome that hormonal challenge. And as for verbal ability, you'll either practice more ahead of time, rehearse your pitch more ahead of time, or you can pause before you talk and just think a little bit more about what you want to say before you say it, so that it comes out right, as opposed to just, going on and on like you would in your week 2 when you're more verbally eloquent. By knowing what your hormonal challenges will be, you can overcome them so that you can excel at work every day of your cycle, no matter what the task is.